G'day, Steve from offthegridinoz.com again. Now look, I finished my day. Well, it's 4 o'clock and it's 61. I suppose you can actually call that finished the day. I'm sitting down on the bridge having a quiet can of water and I thought to myself, I'll start a series on the system. The system, a big question. The system encompasses a lot of things. I've actually mentioned it in that other video that you may see on the sidebar if you look at our videos regarding the government, the laws, all that sort of caper. But no, this is more about just the system. A lot of people move off grid because they may or may not be aware that they're just a little bit unhappy about the system that they live in, the system that surrounds them. Yes, I'm moving the camera around a little bit because why not? Better look at my ugly head. I've had that thing again. This is the bridge, pretty good bridge. But anyway, that was the other video. Yeah, look, the system is a big topic. I'm going to do a series on this. It'll be called just the system 1 2 3 4 rah rah. Nothing complicated. But I think on this first one, what I might just do is touch on what the system is, what I think the system is, what me and Kerry think the system is. Now, when you choose to look into going off grid, or if you have gone off grid, maybe you have your quiet moments in the evening or in the morning having a cup of coffee and you think about why you're doing this. And a lot of people may or may not realise that they probably do it because the system that they used to live within entirely, and I'm not for a minute suggesting that myself and Kerry aren't attached to the system. Unfortunately, just with YouTube, my phone, which is somewhere abandoned in the house, I don't carry my phone with me. All these things, these electronic things, connect us to the system. Now, the system probably is part of the reason why most people make the jump to go what I would call the orthodox version of off-grid. The orthodox version being you do things now off-grid that you wouldn't have been able to do whilst you were connected to the grid. You probably move to a property or an allotment somewhere that is more suitable for self-sustainable living. In other words, your 400 square metre block in the estate. And I'll use a benchmark here. I mean, I'm in Victoria, so I don't know whether you know Victoria. We have estates all through Victoria that what I call rooftop villages. They're 400 square metre blocks filled with one gigantic house. People there comply to everything. They're just lovely system people. They love it. I know the screen image that I'm putting out isn't exciting, but you know, what can I do? It's better than staring at me. I could stick this on the desk and just have it stare at me, but bugger that. Anyway, the system is something that you probably have thought about a little bit. If you haven't, well, it's probably, if you think about it hard, one of the main reasons why you've gone off grid, or why you're thinking about going off grid. The system. Now, to define the system, I would call it myself the thing that encompasses everything that you live within and surrounds you and runs your life. If you are stuck going to a 9-to-5 job, buying from Coles, indebted to the bank, you can't really do anything unless you pay a bill, well, that's what I call the system. If you get in your car and you break the law, the system comes and gets you. If you step sideways on the footpath and upset somebody these days, the system comes and gets you. The system is one of these entities that you can't really see, but it surrounds us all the time. So as far as I'm concerned, the system, in my opinion, and I'm, like I keep saying over and over, I'm 61, fit and healthy, but since I was a young child, I've always known that what's out there isn't necessarily bad inherently, like to its core, but it's not right. I don't believe the system is right. I believe as a species, mankind could be doing a lot better with the resources, with the information that's put out to the population. I think we could be doing a lot better job. So I personally, to sum it up very briefly, and I could spend a week on this, but I don't like the system. I call it, and I have mentioned it in another video or a couple other videos, but I call it outside our gate. Outside our gate is where the system lives. That's where I go to work, like many people, like most. And outside the gate, the system is there to touch you, to affect you, to control you, to do all manner of things, none of which have much to do with your survival, unless you are inherently, and I must make this, in this first system video, I'd like to set a couple of benchmarks. I call it, when I refer to people living within the system, and I've used this for a long time, I call those people Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones. So if you hear me say Mr. Jones, it's not directed at anybody. That's a non-person. It's just an imaginary figure that is somebody that I refer to who is completely entrapped and controlled by the system. Now Mr. Jones, he pays his bills on time, he's connected to everything, he gets lots and lots of the envelopes with the blue label, the red label, lots of demands, lots of pushy phone calls. Mr. Jones is happy with that. Now that's the system, and unfortunately the majority of people are so trained from birth to accept the system that they don't bother to stop and think that there might be something, so let's say middle ground meaning, well, you know, you may still be working within the system, you may still have to go outside the gate, my gate, and deal with the system, and that doesn't make you a criminal. The purists, the off-grid purists who go, we're connected to nothing and we do nothing, well, I bet you they've still got a mobile phone, because if they've stuck a video up on YouTube, guess what? They're connected to the system by their phone and by their internet connection. It enables them to put up the bloody video in the first place. And I'm trying not to swear. Kerry reminded me I should not swear. But the system is really screwing a lot of people over. I nearly used the F word then. It's screwing a lot of people over. They're deluded. Well, not so much deluded. Well, they are deluded, but they're confused, and that's all they know. And I'm going to get up and walk around because holding the camera like this is really boring. But yeah, the system itself is a whole topic in itself that gets broken down, has to be broken down to about 50 different components. Has nothing to do with rights and wrongs, or correct or not correct, or politically correct, or it has nothing to do with that. The system is just this thing that mankind has developed into. There's been lots of systems, feudal systems, you know, you do the research. You know, I'm not a bloody rocket scientist. I don't have to tell you what the systems have been and what systems have been around. You know, we've got the communists, we've got all these systems that have been around. We've had the hippie movement, you know, all great. There's many systems, but primarily all these systems that you and I are involved in today are the Western capitalist system. The system that says we have the capacity to eternally expand, to fend and fight for eternal growth. And I mean, anyone with half a brain would realise that if you're stuck on a globe or a flat plane, depending on what your view is, the area, the region, the planet, the flat plane, whatever you want to call where we are, it is finite. And in a finite system, it does not take a mathematician or a physicist or a bloody rocket scientist to figure out that, hey, what we have here is finite. So we stand all of us usually, not myself these days, but all of us stand there and we watch the news and we go, oh gee whiz, we've got a new plan to increase growth, to expand production, to create jobs and to make more stuff. And my argument to the core of the system's problem that causes me not to particularly like it is you can't have eternal growth. It is a futile, childish. Another saying you'll hear me use a lot is the 7-year-old statement. We can watch Mr. Malcolm Turnbull or Mr. Obama in his old days and Mr. Trump today. They all still promote eternal growth. Well, guess what? Eternal growth flies in the face of the facts. The fact is, and it doesn't matter about what I call the nuts and bolts. Nuts and bolts are all the bits that make up the system. The nuts and bolts are important, but only if used in a fashion that defies nature. And when you are in an enclosed system, whether it be flat, round or otherwise, when you are in an enclosed system, you cannot, if you have half a brain, believe that you can have eternal growth. You might have eternal growth for 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. Shit, you might have eternal growth for 1,000 years. But you know what happens at the end of it? When you finally get to the end of this thing that we call eternal growth, or endless growth, endless expansion, what happens is you can't expand anymore. You can't grow anymore. And you will wind up, at some point, mankind will wind up looking back on itself and going, that was probably a pretty silly thing to think we could do. So yeah, that's the system. Now, I don't like the system in many components. Many of you maybe who are new won't understand what I'm trying to say, but the system itself has many components to it that I'm going to make other videos about. Some components are the components of control. So I'm panning around. You can see over there, actually just to change the subject for 2 seconds, we're only on 25 acres, but we're attached to 200 acres next door, the state forest, and that's attached to about 1,000 acres that goes up the road endlessly, where you don't need, you could be on a select block of 1 acre as long as it's in the right location to do what you need to do to help your own self, to escape the system and help yourself. You only need 1 acre. I've looked at a lot of properties and I've done a lot of work myself, and you actually don't need 25 acres. We don't use half of this property. We do gather a lot of firewood and do other things, but we're attached to farming land and state forest. So pick your 1 acre if that's all you can afford, or you know, if you've got the endless checkbook that I refer to, the $400,000 checkbook, fine. You're probably not watching my video anyway if you have that, because those people cut a check to for somebody else to do the thinking for them. Now, if you're doing the thinking for yourself, pick your block and just think about what you need to do on that